Welcome to Visual Radio. Tonight is June 10th, 2011. My guest is Frank Scheaffer with Sex, Mom, and God. I'm sorry, Frank, I have a tough time saying that.
Well, you know, the title can be read off the book. You don't have to say it, but you can just show it. Sex, Mom, and God.
Show it.
Yeah.
And hey, can we have the door shut? The middle door. Thank you very much. I direct right from my chair.
That's the way to do it.
If need be. Anyways, I'm glad Frank's here. We were supposed to meet maybe a couple of weeks ago, but you're here now, and I'm happy because this is a live show.
Good. This is more fun.
Yeah, there might be millions of people out there. I'm happy to say this is the first TV interview for this book.
That's right. The book came out May 31, so this is the start of my, I guess, publicity on the book.
That's great, and you've got 12 books out, and this one is the third of the God trilogy.
Right, right. They're all standalone. You know, if you haven't heard of the others or ever read them, this book's, you know, you don't need any intro to understand it. But yeah, I wrote 3 books with God in the title, and this is the third one. The first one was called Crazy for God, which was a memoir. The second one, Patience with God, Faith for People Who Don't Like Religion or Atheism, and then Sex, Mom, and God. And the subtitle kind of says it, How the Bible's Strange Take on Sex Led to Crazy Politics and How I Learned to Love Women and Jesus Anyway.
And it's an amazing thing these days because you've got Bill Maher out there, who's on Friday nights.
Right.
And Bill has his movie Religulous.
Right.
Which is his interpretation of what's going on with so many religions.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of it all?
Well, the problem with, you know, in Patience with God, I talk a little bit about Bill Maher, and I have... you know, I watched the movie and I enjoyed it. It was funny, but the problem with this argument between the religious people and the atheists is that the atheists make the argument against the existence of God based on bad things religion has done. But if you think about it, that actually has nothing to do with whether God exists or not. If there is a creator, it might not be the creator described in the Bible or the Torah or the Quran or any holy book, and it certainly may be a creator that has nothing to do with religion. So, you know, one of the things I bring up in Sex, Mom, and God is that, you know, for all we know, God looks at the Bible and books about God as unauthorized biographies that, you know, if he was here, he'd sue because they portray God as a very strange and weird character. But if there is a creator, his existence or her existence or its existence has nothing to do with whether a religion has screwed everything up or not. You know, obviously religion screwed things up because people invented it and people run it. So of course it's a mess like everything else, but that has nothing to do with the existence of God per se. So when you look at Bill Maher on Religulous, the problem with that picture is that, you know, when you mock religion, then you can prove religion stinks if you want, but it still doesn't say anything about the existence of God or not, which is something I went into in this book, Patience with God, Faith for People Who Don't Like Religion or Atheism, because I look at the two things in juxtaposition. And then Sex, Mom, and God's a completely different thing. It's a memoir. It's also a look at the religious right, and it's a book about what my family did in that. My dad was one of the founders of the religious right and of the anti-abortion movement and a lot of things that went with it. And this book basically tells the story of what happened with that right up to the present day with people like Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin and the whole Republican Party turned to the right and so forth. So this is a book that's on current affairs as well as about a childhood growing up in that religious environment.
You know, Frank, I wonder what would happen if the religious right were actually playing by the rules and they weren't going out onto the, you know, a really crazy limb.
Right. Like
Michelle Bachmann. They go into a self-parody.
Yes.
It would be very dangerous if they were very straight and narrow and didn't make any mistakes, and there were no killings of abortion doctors.
Right. Well, the problem with the religious right is today, and when you look at people like Michelle Bachmann and all the Newsweek called me a couple of weeks ago. They were doing a story on Michelle Bachmann, and they wanted to talk to me because they had interviewed her and asked her why she got into politics, and she actually talked about my father, Francis Scheaffer, and said his books inspired her. So my family's connection with the religious right, which I'm exposing here in this book, Sex, Mom, and God, goes back a long way before she was around on the scene, but there are still people who are drawing from people like my father, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, these original people who got this merging of politics and religion in America going in its present incarnation. And, you know, since my family was part of that, when I look at her, I don't see something new, I just see more of the same. And you have to understand that whether it was talking about death panels on healthcare reform, or that Barack Obama was not born in America and the birther, you know, one of the good things, if you can put it this way, about the religious right and the politicians that represent them is they tell so many lies or half-truths or just twist the truth that they continue to have to backtrack, because whether it's, you know, Obama's birth certificate, or whether it's the fact there were no death panels, all these things, it tends to blow up in their faces. Problem is their followers just move on to the next thing. So, okay, he was born in America, but he still might be the Antichrist. You know, there was that crazy poll in New Jersey taken last year where a third of the voters who voted Republican in New Jersey identified themselves as believing that Obama was the Antichrist. Well, when you're dealing with stuff like that, you've gone to a different planet. I mean, this is la-la land. There's nothing to discuss here. It's not like you can, you know, what's the midpoint between total insanity and facts? There is none. So one of the things I do in Sex, Mom, and God is basically just lay out the fact that it isn't just a choice between religion and politics. It's sanity and fact-based reality versus literal la-la land, which the religious right and fundamentalist Christians and fundamentalists of all religions live in. They live in an alternative reality, and that's what the book is about.
And here we are in the midpoint.
Here we are in the midpoint. That's right.
You know, a little bit of prophecy. I was at the gym reading the book on the treadmill. Patience with God, May 16th, 11. I date how much work I do at the gym,
right,
and I time it, right? But I didn't realize the book was coming out May 31st, so I was kind of brushing up, I guess.
Yeah, you were right
psychically. There. And your Sex, Mom, and God is a bit of a biography. You've got a nice, is that a family photo?
Yeah, back in the, what would that be, 1954, something like that. I was born in 52, so I'm 2 years old there. Yeah, that's an old black and white family photo. And I have
That's
pictures.
when I was born, you know, 54.
Well, okay, so that's when the picture was taken. Except this was taken in Switzerland, where I was growing up as the son of an obscure pastor missionary at that time who wasn't known by anybody until he started writing books in the mid to late 60s. And by the 70s, you know, we were flying around the country in Jerry Falwell's jet and, you know, meeting with Ronald Reagan and the Bush family and all these other people, charting a course that would eventually help to bring the Republican Party and the religious right into the same matrix, and they would really become one and the same soon after that. In other words, the party of Barry Goldwater or you know, William F. Buckley was going to go away, and suddenly it becomes the party of Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann and these people. And it's a totally, you know, you can be conservative or you can be liberal, but these guys, the religious right and the new incarnation of the post-Tea Party Republicans, are nothing to do with conservatism that, you know, we're basically the same age that we would have, you know, 20 years ago.
It changed.
Yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, if you described someone as a conservative, it didn't mean what it means today.
It was more of a fiscal conservative.
Yeah, fiscal conservative, and very intelligent people. I mean, William F. Buckley, you know, if you sat him down and had a conversation with him, you know, I'd met him a couple of times, and my father knew him quite well. You know, this was an educated, erudite man and interesting person. You know, you sit down with somebody like Michelle Bachmann or these people, and you're talking to real ideologues, and they're so far out that you couldn't have an intelligent conversation.
Without the facts.
Yeah, and facts mean nothing. You know, it's faith-based politics.
But they look good on camera.
Maybe.
You know, in the television age,
yeah,
maybe John F. Kennedy, who had substance, but just having the image.
Right.
I think that is what caused the Republicans to find Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Let's get a B actor.
Yeah, let's get an actor.
and there you have it. I want to ask you some questions. So being on Jerry Falwell's plane, I was watching the People versus Larry Flynt again the other day. And you know what I taped? I taped Larry King where he had Falwell and Flint on.
Yeah.
That's a great segment. Seeing those two actually reconcile and
talk about it. Well, I never met Larry Flynt, but I did know Jerry Falwell very well. And you know, when we were barnstorming around the country, starting the anti-abortion movement with Dr. C. Everett Koop, who then became Ronald Reagan's Surgeon General.
Amazing.
Falwell lent us his plane, and we would fly around. I gave the commencement address twice at Liberty Baptist back in, what would have that been, 82 maybe, 83?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, hey, I gave the keynote address at the Southern Baptist Convention one year in 84. spoke twice for the Religious Broadcasters Association to about 25,000 people.
30 years old.
Yeah, but you got to understand, the evangelical world functions like North Korea. It's nepotistic. So if your daddy is a famous evangelical and you've got nothing better to do, and you want to follow in his footsteps, you know, since essentially you're selling invisible things that don't need any qualification, anybody can get out there and claim anything. And if you're a pretty good public speaker, which I was, you know, they say the mantle passed, and you can go on and, you know, suddenly all of a sudden you've been called. And of course, what you've really been called to do is inherit the mailing list and the book sales. And, you know, case in point, by the way, is someone, you know, you've been around the block with all your work with rock and roll and music and the rest of it. You'll be interested to know this. You know, I'm a fairly successful author today. My books get published. I get an advance, and I sell them.
A dozen of them. That's really good work.
And a couple have made bestseller lists. But you got to understand something, that when I was writing evangelical screeds, which, by the way, I don't list in the front of my books because I don't count them as books. They were just propaganda in the 70s and 80s. Those books sold by the pallet load what Sex, Mom, and God will sell in individual copies. One example, James Dobson of Focus on the Family gave away 150,000 copies of a book I wrote called A Time for Anger. And it's interesting to note that not even in, what do they call it, inflation-adjusted dollars, just in one-on-one dollars, I've never earned more money than I earned when I was in my late 20s selling God. That's where the big bucks were. So when you fast forward, you have to understand when Rupert Murdoch buys Zondervan, which he did a few years ago, which is the big evangelical publishing company, and then published A Purpose-Driven Life, which sold 33 million copies hardcover.
Who wrote that?
What's his name? You know, the big church out there in California.
Okay.
The name will come back to me in a minute. But in any case, you know, that's where the big bucks are in publishing, more than the, quote, secular publishing. And so people think, you know, that... you know, sometimes I get angry emails saying, "Oh, you sold out because you want to make more money and you know, selling your books on whatever Rachel Maddow or something." I say, "Are you crazy? You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, I was making more money in 3 weeks than I do in a year now." So, and I'm not saying that I was a complete rip-off artist, but when it comes to publishing and media, if you want to make a buck, sell God. If you want to just, you know, scrape along as a writer the way I do today, then, you know, write serious books for the general public, and if you're fortunate, they'll sell enough to you know, keep the lights on, but you're not going to make a fortune.
Well, 150,000 units.
That was just from one person.
Right. I was wondering if the religious right and the Republicans, if they purchase Ann Coulter, if they get boatloads of these and give them away.
Oh, they do. They get, you know, it isn't like book sale. Look, if someone buys Sex, Mom, and God, they're going to, and reads the subtitle, you know, and they're amused by it, how the Bible's strange take on sex led to crazy politics and how I learned to love women and Jesus anyway, they're buying it because they either want to laugh because the book's funny, or they want to know something about the religious right, or they're interested in how this all happened, or, you know, why these people call Barack Obama the Antichrist, or whatever it may be. They're not buying it because they're following me and because my name is on the book and somehow they're going to get some you know, spiritual benefit, almost as if they're taking communion or something. Whereas when you're pitching religious books or books to right-wing groupies, they don't care if it's a good book or a bad book. They're buying it the way Catholics go to church for sacraments. They're buying it the way, you know, people want a signed T-shirt from a basketball star if they're a fan. You know.
So it really is that mentality.
Oh yeah. It's not a, it's basically the religious culture in America has been completely taken over by the celebrity culture and the entertainment business. It's just cast in religious terms. So they're buying books the way people stand to get a glimpse of a star on the red carpet, you know, out in California once a year at the Oscars. They're not really there because of the quality of the acting or whatever. These are groupies, these are celebrity people. And, you know, when I had experience maybe 30 years ago in an airport one time, a lady ran up to me and she said, "Oh, I always wanted to meet your father," and then she put her hand on my arm and says, "And I always wanted, but that's okay, it's good enough meeting you. I just wanted to touch a Scheaffer." Okay, well, when you
oh my God.
Yeah, see, now that's not what happens to authors who write serious books or you know, works that are entertaining. People buy their books because they want the book. Whereas when you're in the religious market, it's a whole different deal. You're selling holy water. You're selling beads. You're selling, you know what I'm saying? It's a different deal.
Well, you know what's interesting is you can prefabricate a Lady Gaga.
Right.
And she might have some talent, okay? But I like the work of Lou Reed, and I've studied the man for years.
Yeah.
And I'm busy working on a book about his 1973 tour. So I'm interviewing the people that were in the tour.
Yeah.
So I'm reading the paper today, and Lou Reed is in Fall River tonight.
That's great.
Yeah, but back in the day, I would know 6 months in advance where Lou was.
Sure, sure.
It just shows you that tonight I'm talking to Frank Scheaffer, and Lou's in Fall River. That's like a mortal sin to me 20 years ago that I wouldn't be there. But I appreciate the artist. I can differentiate when he's on and when he's off.
Yeah.
And you know that Lou Reed is a great essayist.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
When Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix died, he wrote an essay called Shining Nights and Fallen Ladies, something like that. Barry Glovsky published it in Fusion Books. No One Waved Goodbye is the book. I have 2 copies.
Yeah.
And I'm saying Lou is a brilliant writer. And I heard Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull on WNTN radio years ago. It's taken me 40 years. I finally interviewed Ian Anderson, whom I've followed forever.
Yeah, yeah, and I saw him back in the day, you know, doing
at the
thing.
Garden?
No, when I was in Europe, in Switzerland, the Montreux Jazz Festival. He wasn't playing jazz, he was doing his thing, you know, with the flute and everything. But he was an interesting character, where, by the way, speaking of rock and roll, when I was 17 or was I 18 years old, one of the first paying jobs I got was at a discotheque called the Strobe Club. And during one of the Montreux Jazz Festivals, I think maybe 79, no, not 79, 69 or 70, we got a job doing the light show for the Led Zeppelin. So, speaking of which, when I was...
1970?
You know, whatever year it was.
Nice.
70, I think it was. First album coming out. Yeah, nobody, I mean, they were already pretty big, because they got big with the first album, as you remember, but it wasn't like huge. The thing was with them that was interesting is that, speaking of my dad's followings, this will surprise you, I didn't know any of these guys, and I saw, you know, Jimmy Page, and it was great to, you know, to be nearby him and everything, and I noticed he had a paperback in his back pocket stuck in his jeans, and I recognized the cover. It was a paperback of one of my dad's books. I
thought you were going to say Aleister Crowley.
No, so I went.
You know about the connection.
My dad had written a book that. See, my dad turned to the right later in his life, but at that period he was sort of Timothy Leary came to L'Abri to his mission, and stayed for a few days and talked with him. And I asked Jimmy Page. I said, "Well, where did you get this copy of Escape from Reason, my dad's book?" And so we got into a little bit of a conversation.
Escape from Reason.
Yeah, but the book came out in '68. In England, and you know, back in those days, my father was someone who had you know, this is when the Beatles were going out talking to the Maharishi and all that. Remember all that? And there was a whole spiritual stuff. Well, he was someone who showed up a little bit on that, and then later, after Roe v. Wade and the whole abortion thing in 1973, he got into that issue, and then swung to the right on that, and got a following because of that. And then, of course, it was a whole different deal, because it was all politics after that. It wasn't religion anymore. It was all the political connections. And that's when, you know, what I'm talking about in the book in terms of how we got into bed with the Reagans and all the rest of it.
Well, to tidy up what I was saying, though, and it comes right back to this, Ian Anderson's such a brilliant speaker. So I have him on the phone, and I said, you know, Lou Reed does these great essays.
Yeah.
I wish there were more.
Yeah.
You should be out on the lecture circuit. He goes, I don't want to be Tony Blair.
Yeah. How old is Ian Anderson now?
Oh, they you know, I don't want to give out ages of the
well,
ones I know.
What do you figure? Because like
68,
yeah, I would say
69.
Pushing 70.
They're all around 66 to 74.
Yeah.
So we're in a very scary area where a lot of I work with the Bobby Hebb estate, the guy who wrote Sonny.
Yeah.
He lived up in Rockport for years. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
And he just passed away August 3rd of last year. He was one of my closest friends.
Well, all the old rockers are what, between, I'd say, 68 and 70, 72, something like that.
He was only 73, and I consider that young.
Yeah, I do too.
So here's this great, great guitar player, singer that, you know, we lost at 73. This is a very scary time because, we lost Andrew Gold this week. He wrote the title to the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
Thank You for Being a Friend. 59 years old.
That's bad.
Yeah, you know. So my whole point was there's substance with what Lou Reed writes, what Ian Anderson says, and now we have to deal with Sarah Palin. No substance at all.
Yeah, and who knows if anybody who gets her book signed ever even reads it. They just take it home like an object. This is Sarah Palin's book. I'm not sure that they can read, but or they do read.
Well, I'm sure she didn't write it.
Well, obviously not. I mean, the thing was, some of the when I was back in the evangelical thing, at least I wrote my own nonsense, but but I knew guys who were working for big people like, for instance, Charles Colson, who's one of the right-wing leaders, that were ghosting all his books for him and just talking about, oh, well, what it's like working with him and everything. None of these guys write their own stuff.
My Own Nonsense. That sounds like a good title for
I used to write my own nonsense, that's right. I hope it's not nonsense now, but I'm still doing my own writing, that's for sure.
Hey, talking about writing, I've been wondering about a newsletter. We've got in our hands like the WinCam newsletter. I love public access, Frank.
Yeah, it's good for you.
It's a wonderful realm.
And you were saying you were one of the first guys in, too.
In 1979, I did my first show because I had this roommate that he said, hey, your grandma lives in Somerville. Somerville has an access station.
Yeah.
And I was the host of TVI.
It's great.
And Barry Glovsky, who published the Fusion book, he was one of my first guests.
Well, now if you look at something, you were talking about putting your stuff up on YouTube. If you look at YouTube, of course, the spirit that's made it successful, it's sort of the next step of public access. It's what you were doing back in the day.
But we have to be careful because we don't want to lose the channels. It's
that's
very
true.
important.
True.
And these, Comcast and Verizon's at the State House. They were there May 18th trying to get it so that they don't have to go to each city and town. They want to just go to the State House and cut all the cities and towns
That's too
out.
bad. That mustn't happen.
It can't happen. But Barry Glovsky, this is important. We're talking about Lou Reed and Glovsky Publishing Fusion. He finds me on Facebook. We're going to have lunch next week.
Yeah.
So he was one of my first guests in '79.
That's great.
So he'll be back here. You must meet a lot of interesting people beyond Falwell and
Yeah, I did. I mean, back when my dad died, I reproduced in here.
And when was that?
84. But we by that time we were, as I talk about in the book, in Sex, Mom, and God. By the time my dad died, we were in tight enough with people that I've got a file of handwritten letters from Ronald Reagan, President Bush, Gerald Ford. My mother would stop by at the White House to swim in the Ford's pool unannounced, just ring the doorbell like she was going over to a friend's house.
Well, she was.
Yeah, but I mean, it was insane. And then
the Secret Service get nervous?
Well, and at the same time, Dad was writing books like Christian Manifesto, where essentially he was calling for the overthrow of the U.S. government based on not agreeing with Roe v. Wade. When Barack Obama's pastor said, "God damn America," everything hit the fan. When my dad would say, the government should be overthrown because of legalized abortion, he'd be invited to the White House. Now, of course, he was white and he was right-wing, so it was okay. But from my perspective these days, when you look at the hypocrisy of the way the right wing has harbored within it, for years now, for decades now, not just extreme people, but even people whose, extreme statements can lead to violence, that's one of the things I talk about in the book.
Do you mind if we take a quick
go ahead
and talk about sports for just one second?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Hello.
Hello, Joe.
Hey, John. John, say hi to Frank Scheaffer.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
Doing fine. What's up?
Not bad.
We're going to keep it kind of brief tonight, John, okay?
What?
We're going to keep it brief tonight, but what's the game with Toronto? What's going on?
Well, it's 2-1 in the fifth inning.
Who?
And 1 man on Red Sox.
Red Sox are up 2-1?
Yep.
Johnny just interviewed Larry Lucchino.
Sounds
and
good.
Toronto got to run back.
Oh, really?
It's a very quick-moving game.
Okay, so it's 2-1. That's great. We're talking about Sex, Mom, and God.
What is that?
It's a book, John.
Oh, okay.
But John's our sports host, so that's our update. And how about the Bruins? Can you tell us? Now, no...
0-0 early in the first period. I do have a little note regarding the sweep of the Yankees.
Okay, give it to us.
The Red Sox swept the Yankees, as we know, and this is the second time this season that they went into New York and swept the Yankees. The last time a Red Sox team did this was back in 1912. The last time it happened to the Yankees prior to that was in 1990 when Oakland went in May and August and swept the Yankees in a series.
That's fascinating, John.
Yep.
Hey, thank you very much. Next week we've got, and this is a good time to tell everyone, next week we've got Total Patriots, Bob Hildeberg, who lives up the street. So, John, we're going to have you call in and talk about the Patriots with us next week.
I met Mr. Hildebrand on the 25th when we were at that business breakfast in Boston.
You had interviewed Lucino, and I had interviewed Bob Hildeberg, and we're going to interview him again next Friday. How's that?
That's good.
Thank you so much for calling in with the update.
Okay.
All right. Johnny Byers, he's one of the oldest from like 84.
Yeah.
Sports host
That's
guy.
great. That's great.
This fellow, Hildeberg, lives up the street. Is that amazing?
Yeah, he's local.
He's a Patriots historian. So meeting people like you, Hildeberg,
That's
for me,
great.
it's just
great.
overwhelming. I have a lot of questions for you. I'm going to say one thing, too.
Since you're sticking books up here, I'm going to stick this up so people can see the cover.
But there's two things, yes, and that's great.
Sex, Mom, and God, right?
Two things
Even though you can't say it.
Well, what we can't say on Access are two things: overthrowing the government.
Yes.
So, if your father was writing about that,
He was writing about it, but we're not
we
calling
can talk.
for that.
Right, we're not calling.
I'm
for
saying
it. We
it's a
can't do
bad
that.
idea.
Right. And we can't tell people to go and find total patriots. You know, I can tell
Right.
people to go to a website, but we can't do calls for action.
Right, right.
So overthrowing the government and calls for action are the two
We don't
no-nos.
do, yeah.
But we can't talk about God, and we can't talk about sex.
Yeah.
And we can talk about moms too.
Yeah, and
your
this
mom
book
looks
does.
lovely.
She's wonderful. Anybody who looks at this, you know, I got a nice email from my actually not an email. I got a let me just see. There's some pictures.
Beautiful
of her in
pictures of
here.
your mother in here.
Yeah, my mother's gorgeous.
And
And by the way, this book is about how wonderful a person she was, and the fact that even though she was a fundamentalist Christian, her own life was such a witness to charity and kindness that the only way I can put it is I think that she was a lot better person than her theology, because she was just wonderful. But let me see if there's a
some of the stuff shocked me, but I'm not going to talk about it. You're such a good speaker. I have the gift of interrupting, but I haven't interrupted you
Well,
much
you
because
should. Go ahead. But let me see if there's a picture. Here's a picture of my mother when she was 60 years old. I don't know if you can zero in on that.
we can't because the director's in there. But
Okay, but anyway, in any case.
what page is it?
It's on 187. I have at the head of the chapters. There's little pictures of my mother. And
187. Jeff, our director, is here. Jeff Dearman.
Jeff, show a picture of my mom here. I don't know which book you want to go in on. I'm gonna open this up for you. There we go, right there.
I can actually give him the book.
Here you go. Which one are you going in on? That one. Okay. Yeah, Edith Scheaffer was just an
you wanna,
outstandingly beautiful picture.
You know what? I'm going to get up and take the mic off.
And by the way, at the back of the book, there's a picture of me with her now, and she's 96. So you should show him that one too.
So let's see here.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
not the right camera, Jeff. Yeah. Okay.
There we are. Now we just need to get it focused. And you can see what Mom looked like when she was in her 50s. Yeah, he's on it. He's on it. There you go.
If you'd like to read from the book, go right ahead.
Well, you know what I can do is I can read a little bit from the beginning here for you. The book starts in the, getting a little bit of an echo there. This is great. We're getting a little bit of running around on the cameras here. We're good. We're good. I was going to read a little bit from the prologue for you. One of the things I love most about being with my grandchildren is that they only know me now, so before I explain why I had sex with an ice sculpture, or how my family helped push the Republican Party into the embrace of the religious right, and chronicle my family's complicity in several murders, let me say that my granddaughter Lucy has just turned 2. She, along with my 3 other grandchildren, is my second chance now that I've carved out a spiritual identity as dramatically eclipsing of my former self as if I'd disappeared into a witness protection program. So that's how I start the book. And then I go into a few details about the family. My 4 grandchildren, Amanda, Benjamin, Lucy, and Jack, notwithstanding, I'm still prone to label people and ideas as my mother labeled them. Mom divided everything into very important things, say Jesus, virginity, Japanese flower arrangements, lust, see-through black lingerie to be enjoyed only after marriage, and everything else, say those things that barely registered on my mother's to-do list, like homeschooling me. So I'll be capitalizing some words oddly in this book, such as God, sin, love, and girls, and also words like him when referring to God. I'm not doing this as a theological statement, but as a nervous tic, a leftover from my mother Edith Schaeffer's shaped childhood, or rather a leftover from my Edith Schaeffer shaped childhood, and also to signal what loomed large to my mother and still looms large to me. So that's how the book starts in the prologue. Which covered your running around looking for the camera there?
Well, no, Jeff is a great director, but we don't have camera people tonight. So, and visual radio was set up so we have one camera.
Yeah, sure.
And hey, Jeff, I put the center one out of center, so if you could just do that. No, go back to the center camera, and then if you can come in here and just adjust it, thank you. But we're very laid back. It's fun. Jeff is a great director.
It's all relaxed.
And it's all conversation. It's like a telephone conversation. And usually you can turn off the visual and you still got radio.
Which is cool.
Visual radio.
Which I like, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nokia Hewlett Packard kind of grabbed the name for some technology they have. And I wrote to their lawyer and said, come on, I've had this for years.
Yeah.
And then they wrote back and said, someone out in the West Coast has it, and you haven't done anything about that. And I sent them a quick cease and desist. Someone's got that, just leave them alone. But Hewlett Packard and Nokia have some technology now. But it's funny, if you go into the videos on Google, you'll see me more than them.
Yeah,
because
cool.
we have, this will upload. And it's a great conversation with you. How long generally does it take you to write one of these?
Well, this book I worked on for about 2 years, and I went through about 20 plus drafts, which is kind of normal for me.
And do you have editors that look over your shoulder?
No, I've got a really good editor. Actually, my publisher's right here in the Boston area, Da Capo Press, which is out of Cambridge.
Great people.
And they're terrific to work with, and they've got other offices down in New York, and they're part of the Perseus book group. So John Razwitz is my editor, and Lissa is my person who works on promoting the books down there, and they're a good team. So it's nice because they're local, and I can go meet with John in person. So I met with John a couple times on this book. We did a lot on the phone, and then there was a really good copy editor, and it was a good experience. This is my second or third book I've done with Da Capo.
Lissa usually comes to the studio.
Yeah.
And where are you tonight, Lissa?
Yeah.
No, Friday night we give people the night off, but I like being live on the air.
Yeah.
Because there's something a little bit more immediate about being here tonight and knowing people are watching.
Yeah. Well, the guys down at Da Capo are the people who came up with this idea of doing the God trilogy. It isn't that they told me to write one. It's just that after I wrote the first and second book, when I gave them the third, they said, well, you've written a trilogy. Not that there's a beginning, middle, and end. You can read any of them. Crazy for God, which was the memoir, Patience with God, Faith for People Who Don't Like Religion or Atheism, and now Sex, Mom, and God. How the Bible's strange take on sex led to crazy politics, and how I learned to love women and Jesus anyway. They said, well, basically you've written a trilogy because these are all on different subjects, but they overlap.
Well, I mean, if you were in Guantanamo Bay with Bill Maher as your interrogator, there's no way to get God out of you because it's so ingrained in your life.
Well, essentially in the book, at one point I talk about the fact that when I was younger, you'd always worried about motivation. Is this what I really believe, or did my parents teach me this? But, essentially, I'll be in church next Sunday. I go to a Greek Orthodox church. I like the liturgy. And the reason I'm there, there's a lot of reasons I'm there, but one of them is that's the way I was raised. And now I'm perfectly relaxed with that. It's part of my heritage to go to church on Sunday. And in addition to which, I enjoy the community, and I enjoy the worship, I enjoy the liturgy.
When did you find them?
I've been going to the Greek Orthodox Church since about 1989. I actually joined the local parish up there in Newburyport in 1990. So however long that is, 20 plus years, 21 years or so. But it isn't a matter of saying, well, I'm going to this church and everybody outside of it is lost or something like that. That's my old fundamentalist self. That's the way I used to look at church. But for us now, our participation in the Greek Orthodox liturgy every Sunday is just it's a time of stillness and thinking about those mysteries in life that are beyond description. And so liturgy is a good place to do that, as opposed to the Protestant background that I had that was all about sermons and teaching, and if you're not one of us, you're lost and going to hell. And we don't have things like that, which is very comforting.
I was brought up Catholic, so you can only imagine the trauma they inflict on people.
Yeah.
I tell people St. Agnes up the road, it looks like little guard towers on top of the school. And that's really, it was militant.
Yeah.
It was pretty neo-fascist.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was in you were doing that here, and I was in a little mission in Switzerland with fundamentalist parents, and it was strict. But as I talk about in the book, the amazing thing about my mother was that in spite of the fact that officially she had all this theology, when a young pregnant woman would come to L'Abri with an unwanted, troubled pregnancy, my mother would help her and take them in. When gay people would visit our community, this was long before it became fashionable to be, quote, tolerant about diversity and all this business. My parents were very welcoming and didn't tell anybody.
I find that totally fascinating.
Yeah, and I read all about it. I mean, we're talking in the late 50s and 60s. My parents were welcoming and kind to gay people before people were even talking about the issue. And
is it because they were in Switzerland?
No, it's because they were just amazingly wonderful, charitable people. So the crazy thing is here my dad is.
Oh, I'm not taking that from.
No, but I'm saying.
I understand. But
I think so. Yeah, actually, you're right, because they had left the States, because my parents had become really disgusted with the direction of fundamentalist Christianity, split from various missions, and wanted to do something different in this faith mission called L'Abri. But the irony is that in terms of their official theology, they would tell you, no, they believe every word of the Bible literally. And of course, if you believe every word of the Bible literally, the Bible has stuff in it about stoning gay people to death or
eating pork in the same.
Yeah, and
Leviticus.
If a girl loses her virginity, she's to be stoned to death in the gate of her father's house. I mean, this kind of thing. And I would love to go back and meet them as they were when I was a child and say, Mom, Dad, why are you being so nice to everybody if this is what you believe? And of course, what was wonderful was a kind of a great hypocrisy, because I found later in life that the type of Christianity that I remained interested in, and one reason that I'll be in my church next Sunday, is because I followed the example of what they were doing on the personal level with people, not the teaching of what they officially believed, which looks ridiculous to me now. But the way they treated people certainly wasn't ridiculous, and they had a tremendous impact on people's lives. And I think that people will be surprised reading Sex, Mom, and God, that while it is tough on the religious right and the politics, and I expose what happened, and how the anti-abortion movement was used really just to feed the Republican voter into corporate America, and so that the Koch brothers and Fox News and the rest could do whatever they want. The fact of the matter is, when it came to my parents and many millions of evangelical and Christian people like them, there was a tremendous level of kindness and charity when it was on the personal level. The problem is that when the politics became infected with the fundamentalist theology, which is Michelle Bachmann, Sarah Palin, and these people, then people tried to use the politics to do the kinds of things to people, take choice away from women, make sure gay people can't get married, whatever. There was exactly the sort of harsh things my parents didn't do in person, but was the logical destination of that kind of theology unless it's challenged. And that's why in Sex, Mom, and God I challenged that theology while being very respectful of my parents as people and talking about the wonderful things they did for individuals.
Well, like Bill Maher will look at the Bible literally, and you have Jonathan and David. Remember the late David Brudnoy?
Sure, very well, yeah.
You must have been on his show.
I forget whether I was on his show, but I obviously know who he was. He was, yeah.
And being movie critics, he was at the same movie screenings I was at. So yeah. I sent David an email with information about Jonathan and David. Thy love for me was wonderful, passing the love of women. Mm-hmm. I think it's in Saul 2, Samuel 2.
Right.
And there are books out on it. I heard about that because of Moshe Dayan's daughter.
Yeah.
Do you remember that incident?
I remember that.
She went into the parliament, the Israeli parliament, for gays in the military, and they freaked out.
Yeah.
Not in this house. But that's what turned me on to that. So I started reading about it and writing about it. And then there are books on it now. Mm-hmm. So the religious right wants to say, well, Jonathan and David were brothers. David had a very promiscuous sex life.
Yes, he did, yeah.
Far more adventurous than page 153 of your book.
Yeah.
So they kind of just push it aside. They don't want to tell people that David was highly promiscuous.
Yeah.
And not only with women, but probably with men as well.
Sure.
So what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that you essentially read the Bible. It's a book that has many contradictions in it. So when it comes to slavery, you can find things about treating your neighbor as yourself that would lead you to not hold slaves. But then you read another passage and it says, yeah, it's fine to own slaves, as long as it's a foreigner and not one of your own tribe.
Ah, got it.
So you can find people who were in the abolitionist movement that I talk about in the book who are citing one set of passages, and you can find another set of people citing another set of passages, and they both have good arguments if you take the approach that the Bible has literal things in it that you have to follow literally. The problem is when you follow these things literally, sooner or later they collide because it contradicts itself. So which is it? You know, are we to treat our neighbor as ourselves, or can you own slaves as long as they're foreigners? And you know, that's why when you get to passages about gay people, for instance, and you decide to take those seriously while making sure you're not doing any of this other stuff, which no ordinary fundamentalist in America is making arguments for owning Canadians, for instance, which would be fine because they're foreigners to us. You know, and obviously I'm joking, but nevertheless, that would be about as sensible as taking the passages in the Bible about gay people and applying those literally as if somehow, you know, we got to follow that stuff. If we, you know, why pick that? Why not work to reintroduce the slave trade? That would make just as much sense.
And what about shellfish and pork?
Well, or all of the above, you know, or wearing cotton and wool, you know, at the same time, and you know.
I was working with the late Jimmy Miller, who made records with the Rolling Stones, and Eric Clapton, et cetera, et cetera. And we were in New York. Jimmy his mother was Protestant, his father was Jewish. So he knew both very well. And we were having dinner or lunch with one of our business associates.
Yeah.
And the fellow was kosher. And Jimmy said to him, "You realize that you didn't get what you thought you were getting. You're eating pork." "Oh, well, too late now."
Too late now, yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like...
Yeah, there you go.
Adhering to, you know, I think we should probably go vegetarian, but that's not the point. The point was religion was saying, don't eat this.
Hey, I was in a kibbutz one time on what's called the Sea of Galilee in the Bible, in Israel, and I called the waiter over. This is back in the 70s, and I said, you know, there's a bug in my salad. And in an American restaurant, you know, they'd come out and bring you a new salad and apologize. I didn't understand that because I was in a strictly Orthodox establishment, that the bug counted as meat, which I had been eating fish, and you can either have fish and milk and other things, or you can have meat and then there's no milk and there's no mixture with certain foods. By having a bug in my salad, the whole table was defiled. So I had no idea, but it was kind of funny because he came running back in with a couple of people. They took everything off the table, the cloth, the silverware, everything, and reset the whole thing and started the whole meal again. And I was thinking, well, you know, this is an overreaction. I just said there was a bug in my salad. You know, I'm not that upset. But later, the guy I was with explained to me, you have to understand that because, you know, now you had mixed meat and the fish, in terms of the Levitical law, whatever it is they're following.
Whoa.
This wasn't a little deal to them. This was a big deal. And that's what happens when you start doing things very, very literally. And of course, there's a lot of Christian groups. This has nothing to do with them being Jews or any particular religion. Any religion applied as fastidiously and literally as that, you know, pretty soon you're going to wind up with some very crazy stuff going on.
You know, I like fanaticism when it comes to rock and roll, you know. The Herman's Hermits.
Right.
All the Zombies, time of the season, you know.
Yeah.
So I like good, fun fanaticism where music, it's exciting. It's exciting to know the history of it.
Yeah.
And I long for the days when you knew who the song were. Andrew Gold, him dying is kind of like the end of an era. The Golden Girls theme song, you know.
Yeah.
But this Sarah Palin kind of fanaticism, it's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you see, none of these guys were trying to legislate your life based on the moral teaching of one religion. And Sarah Palin and these people, ignorant and crazy as they seem in many ways, are very serious, and they're part of a movement I talk about in the book here and explain, which was called the Reconstructionists. They wanted to reconstruct the country based on the Old Testament law. And though no one's heard of these guys, like Rusesh Rushdoony and Gary North in terms of the general public, they had a following within the Christian world that then spun out and infected people like the recent Jesse Helms, politicians who were on the right, and now this new generation of Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin, these other people who have come along, and the evangelical elements in the Tea Party are basically what they're trying to do. And I don't think many Americans understand this, but it's one of the reasons I wrote this book, try to explain it. In the best of all worlds, America would be a Christian version of Iran. This would be a theocracy. We would have laws legislating morality in this country. And essentially what they're trying to do in the name of Christianity is introduce a form of Sharia law in this country. I don't mean the Islamic Sharia law, but their version of it. And one of the ironic things about people, for instance, like Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, who goes around giving anti-Islamic speeches, Sarah Palin, who talks about, and these other people. That
seems like the antithesis of what his father wanted.
Yeah, but exactly right. But one of the ironies is they keep accusing Muslims of trying to impose Sharia law here in America, which is nonsense because the Muslim community is small and is not doing that. But actually, if you look at the agenda of the religious right and the Republican Party today, in large parts of it, they are actually trying to impose a Christian version of Sharia law. In other words, take certain biblical concepts and apply them to civil societies.
But there's a reason for it, and it's called power.
Yeah, it's called power.
I mean, let's take it, Rush Limbaugh scoring drugs in a Denny's parking lot is not someone that really believes the stuff he's selling.
Not at all.
He's selling it, and it feels like he's written a script, or his people have written a script, and he's a very good reader.
Yeah. But they make a lot of money doing this.
Right.
But the power part comes in with people who really do believe what they're selling, not Rush Limbaugh, not some of these guys, not Sean Hannity and all these people. They don't. They're just in it for the money. But there are people running around in politics today who actually have an agenda that we saw in places like this group called The Family on C Street in Washington, and all these sex scandals that were happening inside their little hostel they were running there. But what they're really after is something much more serious, and that is they want to actually do what Sarah Palin and these people talk about, and that is they're take America back. What they mean by that is they want to actually bring us back to a place that would have been familiar to people in the Bay State Colony when Winthrop was governor. And this was a place that was going to be a city set on a hill to show the rest of the world how to live, to be a Christian state, and so forth and so on. That's really what they have in mind. And so when they bring these legislative agendas forward on things like abortion or gay marriage, that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in a much wider agenda, and it goes back to these groups called the Reconstructionists that I talk about in Sex, Mom, and God and explain. And I think people should pay attention to this, because unless we understand what the overarching theory is behind these social movements that come out of the right, we're going to continue not to be able to really answer or deal with it. And people just see it piecemeal. They think, oh, well, it's just these crazy people doing all this stuff. It isn't. The religious right actually makes a lot of sense from their point of view.
Well, what about the responsibility of when this fellow that did the, this might be Frank Dell'Istrito. Hold on a second. Hello?
Oh, Joe.
Hey, Frank.
Yes, calling to talk about movies. How you doing?
Good. Say hi to Frank Scheaffer.
Frank Scheaffer, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. We're having a nice conversation here. What are you up to?
Okay, well, I just ran home from work. I had to work late tonight, so I could call on time to talk about a farewell to arms. Is that right, Joe?
That's correct. And let me see here. What time do you have on your watch?
It says 11 minutes to 9.
We've got about 4 minutes left. I just wanted to wrap up by saying, hold that thought, Frank Dell'Istrito. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to wrap up by saying there's a responsibility when this whole thing, the world is ending.
Right.
And people start dying over it.
Yeah.
That's so irresponsible.
Well, and the crazy thing is, we're in the middle of a situation. People could say, well, Sex, Mom, and God is about religion, and what's relevant about that? Well, my son served in the Marine Corps, and he fought in Afghanistan twice and went on a mission to Iraq and to the Horn of Africa. And it's because there were people shooting at him in the name of religion, as in we were involved in basically an 11th century jihad when it came to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And so, when we have people in our own country talking about imposing religious morality legislatively,
it's a real farewell
this is
to arms.
This is a serious deal, and it's double ironic that these guys wrap themselves in the American flag when the people who have been shooting at us actually share their philosophy. They don't share their religion, but they share their philosophy about imposing religion on people. That's what the Taliban does. That's what Al-Qaeda is all about. And here we got it in our own country in the form of, these lunatics on the religious right. So Sex, Mom, and God is the book anyway.
Wow. Frank Dell'Estrado, sorry, man, but we were in this conversation, but A Farewell to Arms kind of segues nicely, doesn't it?
It sure does. Now, are you showing the 1932 or the 1957 version?
Hey, Anthony, what version are we showing? Do you know? Anthony's in the next room, but I don't know if he knows which version. I've got two Franks here today, and I really appreciate your time.
Hey, it's been good.
You're always welcome back.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Just invite me sometime. I'll be down here.
And we do a public access movie, a public domain movie, and we don't have that information, Frank. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'm going to guess it's the 1932 version, which might have fallen out of copyright protection. And if it's the 1932 version,
I got to sign your book for
my
you.
guess is you're
Joe, right?
I mean, it is an anti-war tale, but Hollywood being Hollywood, they played up the romance more and gave the stars more center stage. A couple of things for your viewers. Helen Hayes made precious few movies in her life. She was primarily a stage actress, so this is a chance to see her in her prime, where she's a young woman. Gary Cooper, we usually see him as an older man on the movies that are broadcast today, and here he is as young and as virile as they come. The interesting thing about this is early 30s, and they approached the out-of-wedlock pregnancy pretty much head-on, which you could do from 1930 to 1934, but there were grumblings about that being on screen.
And that was our theme of the show tonight.
Well, and then the Hayes Commission, and it all changed, didn't it?
Yeah, well, they passed the production code in 1930, but they pretty much ignored it because they, after all, paid the production code. And then the Catholic Church, the Legion of Decency, put a lot of pressure on them. So the production code became pretty strictly enforced from 1934 until the 50s, and when it started to loosen. Incidentally, the first version of Farewell to Arms was 1932, before the production code really kicked in. And the second version, 1957, just as the production code was crumbling, and both of them deal with an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, which for most of the 30s, all of the 40s, and a good part of the 50s would have been a taboo subject.
What a nice subject for our show tonight.
Yeah, it's great. Good choice. And you know what? If Sarah Palin and company have their way, we'll be back in the same spot.
Okay. Well.
See, we were talking about Sex, Mom, and God.
Well, we're talking about Sex, Mom, and God and censorship, and just the fact that, the whole idea of trying to impose morality legislatively, and it actually fits in very well because it's what we've been talking about for an hour.
And so this is a good segue. Huh?
Are we still on the air?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're just building it into the conversation. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind it at all. Farewell to Arms was supposed to be autobiographical of Ernest Hemingway, and the two actors that played the lead role, Gary Cooper in the 1932 version and Rock Hudson in the 1957, and I'm saying both because I honestly don't know which one you're showing. Neither one reminds me of Ernest Hemingway at all, so they smooth that edge over. And for people that are going to movies today, Ernest Hemingway steals his scenes in the newest Woody Allen movie, Midnight in Paris.
Which, you saw it?
I saw it. I loved it.
I did too. I was just talking to Joe about it, telling him he's got to go. But I also told him the less you know about this movie before you see it, the more you're going to enjoy it.
I think it's a wonderful movie. I think the actor who plays Ernest Hemingway, Corey Stoll, is brilliant in it. And when he's on screen, he's all you look at.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a great picture.
Yeah, he's not a big part though. I mean,
well, nobody has a big part in this movie except a couple of the stars. I mean, there's all these great cameos. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, no, it was terrific. Yeah, I mean, Adrian Brody's Salvatore Dali was damn good. Now, you're right. There's a lot about this movie I liked.
Me too.
And in fact, I liked everything about it. And I think it's Woody Allen's best film in quite a few years.
Yeah, and for somebody my age, I'm not as old as he is, but it's encouraging that he's making some of his best work now because I mean, look at it. You know, he's not a young guy anymore, and here he is. He's making a terrific, terrific picture.
If you guys would like to talk movies for a full 55 minutes some Friday, we love talking movies.
Yeah, I like talking movies.
Oh,
too.
so, you know, Frank, I think it would be great if you guys want to discuss a movie in advance, you know. We'll talk about it. But I think that's we got 1 minute left.
Nice meeting you, Frank.
If we're still on the air, the thing I like about Woody Allen is for 40 years now or so, he's been making a movie a year. I mean, directing a movie is not easy. It's hard work and it's not pleasant. And
yeah, he's really something.
He's made some good ones. He's made some I'm not too in favor of, but he is. You know, he's as far as I'm concerned, this ranks with his best.
It's a good picture.
But he's been doing this for so damn long.
And we got to wrap up now. Frank, thanks for calling in. Frank, thank you for being on the show. Thank you to Jeff Dearman and Anthony Gamari and Joe LaRocca, who did see the movie as well.
Yeah.
And good night, everyone. Thanks. Thank you, Frank.
We done?
Visual radio.
That's good.
I think the tape's still rolling, so I can. There we are. We faded to black.
We're good. Hey, Jeannie.
Did you have fun?
I had fun, Joe. I'll see you again. Good luck with everything. I'll look for this. I'll check myself out on YouTube.
You're on Facebook, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Send me the links and I'll send.